Lemon Amiga presents a Playguide video review. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Hey there, welcome to another Lemon Amiga game guide and review. This time we'll be taking a look at Gloom Deluxe, developed by Black Magic and released by Guildhall Leisure Software in 1995. To begin, we must set up the game using the utility which is included with the hard drive installation, and yes, this is a hard drive WHD load version I'll be using at the moment, and changing to the R40 chip which I'm using. The R40 CPU makes sure that we can play this game at somewhere near a good resolution. The game begins with a static introduction picture and some atmospheric music to go along with it. The main protagonist of the game, you can see, is a devil-like creature. By pressing that space bar, we can tackle that creature and get on with that game. You can see a number of options on the title screen, including changing the controls of the 1 and the 2 player game, and we can also change that between keyboard and the CD32 pad as well. And that really makes a difference because we can strafe using the CD32 pad, but for this example I'll be using the keyboard, and we can also choose our gore level as well. I'll be choosing messy for this, and we can even see the programmers of this game, programmed by Mark Sibly, the graphics by the Butler Brothers, and the music you can hear was by Kevin Stannard. You can see it was created using his Blitz Basic 2 package plus Dev Pack, and it created those graphics using Deluxe Paint 3 and 4. Returning to the main menu, we can press space again to access the 1-player game, and from here we can access our saves, but by selecting a new game we'll start right from the beginning, and you can see a great screenshot introduces us to this first-person shooter game. Pressing the escape key, that brings up the options menu. From here we can change the pixels, and let's leave that on 1:1 pixels for the moment, and we can also upgrade to a full screen environment. We can also change the floor and the ceiling to switch the floor and the ceiling off, and that really comes in handy with lower grade processors like the O20 and the O30, but with the O40 that we're playing this at the moment, and we are playing this in med-res as well at the moment, then this machine should run fairly swiftly. Yes, it's the 27th of February and it's my 40th birthday, so for that celebration I thought I'd bring you one of my all-time favourite games on the Amiga. And yes, I did play this game on the keyboard to death, and I completed it a number of times. For me, the great embarrassment of the Amiga is it never really had a great Doom clone, and although many distributors tried to create a great Doom clone like Fears and Breathless, to my mind, the Gloom series is probably the best out of the bunch. It runs the smoothest and is the most fun, and as you will see, this is the very best that the Amiga had to offer. Dotted around the first level we will find a number of upgrades to our gun, and those appear on the bottom register. We are now up to power 5, and that means that we can tackle these enemies, but what the player will find is the enemies get harder as you find those upgrades, so it's impossible to continue unless you have those. And at the end of each level you'll find a teleporter which teleports us onto the next one. At this point, players may be reminded of the Aliens movie with James Cameron and Sigourney Weaver, of course, and that Sigourney Weaver movie did inspire a number of clones on the Amiga, such as Alien Breed and later Alien Breed 3D. Taking all those into account, I still think this game is a better Aliens clone on the Amiga, most notably because these graphics are great and they are high resolution. I'm actually playing this on 640x512 MedRes Interlaced at the moment, and MedRes Interlaced is probably the very best that the old 40 could do, and you really need an old 60 to be able to play this in high res interlaced, which is 1280x512, which really is a jump up, and it's almost 720p, which is the minimum standard for high resolution. And at the time, I really did think that Doom on the PC was very easy to clone, and the Amiga could have done it many more times than it did do it, but the Doom clones which did appear on the Amiga were very few in number compared to how many there could have been, given a good set of editors. And this level design was made available for editing later on, again, as we shall see. But for the moment, I've cleared this level. Let's activate the switch at the end, and sometimes those switches can activate hidden areas, and so it's best to explore all the areas and destroy all the bad guys, of course, which are pouring out of those. In that case, it looks like Space Marines, and maybe we are the alien in this case. We start off with 3 lives, as you can see at the bottom, and we also have an energy bar that we can keep topped up as well, but unlike Doom, we do not have a shield quota that we can top up by collecting shields, and the gun is slightly different as well. Instead of a range of guns, we do get a range of firepower, those changing colour depending on the strength. We're already up to strength 2 fireballs at the moment, and firing these fireballs isn't so much of a pain, because that does create a nice visual effect as those march down the screen. And we can also pick up an upgrade later on which will give us dual fireballs, which really is a great effect. And in the meantime, you can see I'm collecting, just like Robocop, some baby food, in this case a bottle of milk, and that bottle of milk has got a rubber teat on the end, not quite sure why, but in the meantime let's clear away the last of these bad guys, determined to blow us away. Then we can get away towards the exit, and if we pick up more than the quota of fireballs, that will go into dual fire automatically, but by the time we've opened that door, the dual fire is worn off. Luckily, concentrated fire on that job gets rid of those first time, and I think it's a great effect that it lures us down from level to level, not by a physical platform, but by a mental image of Marines advancing through a landscape. And maybe we are advancing through a submarine, or maybe, as I thought, an intergalactic spaceship flying through space. Maybe this is an underground dungeon, but this could really be anywhere, and it's the great atmosphere of this game which makes it so that you could be anywhere, and all that matters is getting rid of all these bad guys and getting your way through, not to points, but progress in this game. I feel it's a pity that there is no in-game music, but by layering on the in-game music after all this time, we can now hear what that would sound like. Tactic in this game is to leave all the upgrades as far as milk is concerned until the last moment, because as you are collecting those, that could trigger off extra guys, and extra guys can lure you in with traps just like that. So as you can see me ignoring all the energy power-ups, I'll make my way towards even more bullet vest upgrades, and that should make short work of these guys. The AI is pathetic, as you would imagine on a game such as this, particularly released in 1995, but that's great because it just means that the enemies run towards you, blazing away, and it means that you have to dispatch those quick style, and so that's all you tend to do on these levels, is just look out for those enemies and then gun them away as quickly as possible. In for the health yet again meant I was under attack, and that meant that our pickup of health wasn't as great as it could have been. So at this point I think it's wise to find some more health on this level before we venture on to the next section, and let's hope that we remember where we found that. Luckily at least 3 of those should give us somewhere near full health, and so it doesn't really take that many to fill us up to full strength all over again. And you can see various antechambers and rooms off the main complex, but I'm venturing in now towards the exit, and it doesn't really matter how much health that we have at this point. As long as we have enough, we can duck and dive our way through all this trouble. And you can see those guys again don't really aim on target, and with our strafing abilities available on this keyboard or the CD32 joypad, we can get around most of that. And it even gives us some extra pickups as well, just to make the life more fun and even more pleasurable playing this game than it ordinarily would be. And again, it's a sneak 'em up at this point. You don't really want to attract too much enemy attention, and you don't want to be vulnerable either to all those enemy attacks, and that's really where the atmosphere builds up and gets really great. And so let's run our way around those bad guys and hopefully now make our way towards that exit. The difficulty curve in this game is also great. It starts the player off with a few easier levels, and then it jumps the player off the diving board and they have to dive straight in using the strafing method and all guns blazing at all times. And it's great that we don't have ammo in this game. We have infinite ammo, and as long as we are powered up we can blast away with our plasma rifle to our heart's content. Unfortunately, we do not have missiles and ranged attacks in that way, and it would have been nice to have some kind of missiles and something which resembled an electric shock and things that were from the Doom game. But we didn't get those. What we didn't get is a direct rip-off. We got a major event in itself, an absolute unique game, and not based on Doom, because Doom had a number of features different to this, and the 3 lives aspect was also different, and so this game really does stand out in its own right. At the moment you can see I'm tentatively making my way through this complex, and once again picking up that extra ammo, anticipating those guys appearing, but that doesn't really last for very long, and that disappears even though we are not even firing that gun. So sometimes that extra ammo disappears before the enemies have showed up. But in this case we can always backtrack and lure those guys out at our own discretion. This time the coast is definitely clear, so now we can jump into that environment and hopefully into a gap, and revolving around we can pick up even more upgrades, and it's great that it gives us all these great upgrades, but even not great because unfortunately it's just the same old weapon that we have already. And even though I have selected hopefully the most gory option, I don't tend to see much blood hanging around, and those dead bodies disappear as well. And unfortunately that's another aspect of this game. Unfortunately the bodies do not hang around for us and litter the screen. added to these graphics and this great atmosphere, we also have a great range of sound effects, and sometimes those guys will make a range of noises as they get hit, and at least 3 different noises, which is absolutely great and adds yet another layer of atmosphere, as we don't know which way to go and which is the safest way to go towards the end of this level. And periodically at the end of some levels will give us an end of level boss as well, and I know for a fact that there is an end of level boss at the end of here, and it gives us some extra health, fortunately, because that health really is bottoming out at this point. And given all these enemies, that really is a good job, seeing as we're attaching ourselves to the end of level boss complex right now. And the enemies, fortunately, can back off and hide, which gives us time to recoup. And again, with that amount of energy, it's probably a good idea to strafe the enemies as much as possible, just like that, and fire a hail of fireballs off into those corners, and hopefully you can avoid most of the firepower in the meantime. So having done that, all we need to do is to get to the exit, and that will trigger the end of level boss, which is a huge mechanoid, which is quite like Ed 209, and that will fire yet more plasma balls towards us, so we have to fire plasma balls back and get rid of it. And hanging on to those 3 lives, it's a great feeling that we do have that ability, and we can always survive given our skills at any given time. And it's a choice if we wade in there and face that action, or whether we get blown up. It's our first life over, and this is only level 3, and there are quite so many more levels than this. I think there are at least 5 or 6 sections. It's been some while since I completed this, but I think there are at least 5 or 6 scenarios, and we're still on scenario 1 at the moment, which looks again like a space base or a space station or a ship flying through space. And so we'll have to start that level, and this time with full energy hopefully, but unfortunately none of the upgrades, because often those upgrades do not respawn from the last time we picked those up. But luckily we didn't pick these 2 up, and that tops us up to a reasonable level. And so let's check out an antechamber that we didn't find out before, and in here we'll find a unique item that makes us invisible, and that's just like Doom again. It's a great add-on upgrade. It means we will not get hit, but that doesn't really matter when we're teleporting around into unknown territories. In this case we find a coin-op machine, which is actually playing Overkill, the game previous to this by the same maker, Mr. Mark Sibly. Mark Sibly coded this game, and he originates from the Mount Eden area of Auckland Island in New Zealand, and he coded first of all Sorcerer's Apprentice in 1990. He then followed that up with Blitz Basic, which appeared on the Highsoft Systems label in 1990, which went on to create games like Skid Marks. And in between creating Blitz Basic 2, he himself created Overkill, which appeared on the AJ machines in 1993, and then he took that and turned that inside out for the 3D game Guardian, which appeared in 1994. And we've certainly seen Guardian and Overkill reviewed already. He took the 3D engine and created the Gloom engine, which first appeared in 1995. The Gloom Deluxe that we're actually looking at the moment appeared in 1996, and with that you can actually enhance the screen and select different screen modes, so that's why we can select the med res at the moment. And medium res interlaced isn't so bad, considering what I used to play this on, which was 320 x 256, and that really is a small resolution, but in those days it had to do. Back on the Amiga, you can still hear the Edso 9 creatures thumping around, and we don't really have to take on any enemies at this point because we should have got round to blowing those up the first time around, which is absolutely great in my book. It means you don't have to wade through the same old enemies all over again, which is a pain having to restart the level from scratch. But luckily this game does not give us that option, but seemingly we are getting lost at the moment. What I'm trying to do is head towards the revolver, and the revolver should bring us out in the hall of side doors that we entered before and face that robot all over again. Or we can simply run past that robot while it is stuck in a corner and run straight through to the exit onto the next level. As you progress through the game, you tend to know what to expect, and that is an onslaught at any given moment. And just like the exact same level in Doom, all we have to do is to press that button to initiate that action. And just like Doom, all you need to do is to run into that corner, and that is yet another great feature in this game. And you can see it's a fun game, and it's a joy to play through this and creep up all these guys. They really don't take much intelligence to get around, and the game holding our hand and helping us at every opportunity. Sometimes it will lead us astray into bonus rooms. We can pick up bonus items and power-ups and things like that, but usually it's a pretty linear game without much variance on offer, and usually if we know where to go, we can march straight towards the exit and mow everything down in our way. And again, those infinite bullets really do prove opportune at every given moment, and all I have to do is to find all those rooms, and there isn't really many puzzles on offer in which to solve. Usually it's a blast fest, and usually getting out of corners, which hopefully I will do at any point, is the way to go, and to strafe the enemies at every opportunity to avoid every bullet that they fire. And now we seem to be moving on to a different section. You can already see that we've moved on to the working area, maybe the workshop area of this complex, because we are now facing a different colour scheme on the walls, but it's the same old guys who are attacking us. But we certainly will move on to another scenario a little later on as we move down into the Gothic tombs. For now, we find opening and closing doors in place of lifts and elevators, and that I guess we'll have to do on this flat plane 2D/3D adventure. If all else fails, hide behind the scenery and use that scenery and jab away at the arm, just like Robocop on the Commodore 64, aim for the arm, and you'll find that eventually those guys roll over and die. And that's the easy way to kill all enemies. Simply hold them in there using the force of the gun as a force field to hold them back and to absorb all their bullets and to save ourselves getting hit. It's a great satisfying explosion when we blow up that final bad guy after a huge fight, and it's also a great feeling to progress and explore these mazes for the very first time. Although perhaps not as open world as Doom, it's certainly as open world for me as I wanted it, and this closed room environment actually feels quite claustrophobic, which is again another difference from the Doom series, which sometimes feel quite open worldy. But this meant that the rooms and corridors had to be explored one by one, and you are never quite safe, and you're never quite expecting whatever is about to appear. But thanks to those sound effects, when it does appear, it sometimes is a shock, and sometimes you have to be ready on that fire button, particularly with the amount of energy I seem to have at the moment. but we are looking for another gun upgrade to give us the blue plasma bombs, and that will at least give us the same firepower as those Ed 209 drones, which would be a great thing. But for the moment I'm actually negotiating loads of teleports which should take us back to where we need to go. While I attempt to do that, let's listen to some more music, this time from the first Gloom sequel, Gloom Special Edition. Music definitely reminds me of the music that I used to play along with this game, and for inspirations of that you might want to check out Charlie, the 7-inch remix by The Prodigy, Insomniac by DJ PC, or perhaps Go, the Rainforest mix by Moby. If you play those on YouTube, that will give you some idea of the music that I used to play on my CD player at the same time as trying to play this. So this music reminds me of that music, and that music also reminds me of this game. To add to the acid trip, we also find flashing lights which appear on the sides of walls, and that's another great effect and shows that we could have had more animations live in these types of games, and those neat touches really create that atmosphere and make this an extra special game and a very fun game to play on your Amiga. Stage running away isn't really an option, so if you find yourself running away and you're not shooting your way through all hellfire, then unfortunately you're not going to progress far in this game. So it's time to wade on in and take on those bad guys as soon as humanly possible, and don't wait for those things to appear around corners. Sometimes blast your way around corners just to make sure that there is nothing in your way, and that's usually what I tend to do, simply blast my way around so that if anything does come around then it won't get very far. Paranoia is also an element of this game, and sometimes you'll be turning around incessantly thinking that the guy is behind waiting to blow us up. Sometimes there are, so that's just an element in this game. Measly amount of health, sometimes defense is the best attack, and sometimes if you don't really know these levels, creeping forward is the best measure, because turning around it might reveal some extra firepower that we certainly need if we died previously, or it can reveal a load of enemies as well. You can see 2 goggles on the floor. Those are extra X-ray goggles, but we won't collect those on this playthrough. We'll just concentrate on attacking those guys head on.
Visitors from the past shall return to the darkness once they
see as soon as we take one step towards the exit, all those enemies will pour out towards us, and to save all that ammunition soaking into the scenery, the best thing to do is just point straight forward and hope none of those guys get a shot on line. When you thought it was safe to step a toe back into that water, no, all of a sudden you are not safe, and so sometimes it's best to back your way towards the exit, covering your back just in case something leaps out at the last moment. So I feel this game is full of fun of excitement, full of enjoyment. The difficulty curve is quite easy and quite linear, and it does lure the player in to get deeper every time, and there is an option to save our progress if we get deep into the game. Which is probably good given the amount of dying that I'm actually doing on this playthrough. Yes, it really does take it easy on the player if the player takes it easy on the game, and if you creep through this going very slowly and anticipating attack any moment, you'll get far. But if you go through gung-ho, like I'm trying to do at the moment, trying to remember this game after quite a few years away, then it really will take some time to not kick your ass. It will kick your ass just like this if you allow it to. And we're on our last life, and as I say, there are quite some more levels after this, and we are probably not even a quarter of the way through this game. Getting past the last few enemies on this section, we'll actually skip forward in the game and we'll actually load one of our saves that we've managed to save onto that disc, and that brings us out at the Gothic tombs. The Gothic tombs opens with yet another great introduction picture, and in this version you can also hear great atmospheric music as well. Still playing this on Med-Res Interlaced mode, and still playing this on an Amiga 4000. So first of all, let's create ourselves a full screen effect, and let's anticipate all the enemies which will appear on this level. And because this is a brand new section, we'll find a brand new level layout, brand new level details, and brand new enemies as well, including these lizard men, which appear to be semi-transparent, and we'll also find transparent ghosts as well. Those ghosts can float straight through that scenery, so they can attack us from any angle. As soon as you hear those roaring away, that means that they are attacking, so you have to stop what you are doing, turn around and fire wildly, and hopefully if you can do that in 360 degrees, you can avoid those ghosts. On the original Gloom, I think the ghosts actually said, "Help me," and maybe that "help me" will be seen in a little later on the Playguide. But for the moment, they actually scream at the player, and that was for the deluxe edition, which you can see at the moment. This time the buttons are reminiscent of Total Recall, you'll notice, and there aren't any other films which have that symbol except for Total Recall, so yet again borrowing from film genres in these games is not uncommon, and virtually all of them did it. And that reveals another antechamber in which we'll find another one of those symbols, and that is guarded as well. These great graphics were drawn by Hans Butler and his brother Kurt Butler, and they moved on to Super Skid Marks, which also appeared in 1995. Lastly, this great music that you heard was created by Kevin Stannard, and I think you'll agree it's great music, even though we can't play that in the game. Guildhall Leisure were also prolific in the Amiga's final days, releasing XT Ream Racing that we've seen in the Top 50 guide, and also games like Legends, which is supposed to be better than Zelda in every way, although not many people have played it. On the Amiga, I'm still trying to make my way through this game, and if you remember, we still have not flicked that second Total Recall switch, so let's do that now. I hope that you'll agree that these great graphics and this great sound archive really makes this game extra special. Gloom was a typical bedroom production, only a small group was involved, working long hours in a tiny flat, apparently above a restaurant in Auckland, New Zealand. And Hans and Kurt Butler, apparently their father was German, hence the Hans and the Kurt, but they were originally from Samoa, who ended up moving to New Zealand, and I think yet again their graphics really stand up as really great graphics, better than we saw in Eye of the Beholder, and it has that kind of a feel. I guess one thing missing is a map function, and I don't think that there is a map in this game, and not that that would make that too much easier, but it is amazingly difficult to navigate your way around, and none of the mazes are too big to memorize, and sometimes you can discover just by falling over those some extra upgrades, and they certainly make this game worthwhile. With the skulls on the cages, no prizes for guessing what is about to happen next. Yes, those animals will wander directly into our firepower, and as long as we are quick on that trigger finger, and I guess yes, you could patch the press fire button to the turbo mode on a controller, but I'm actually using the keyboard at the moment so I can use the strafe options, and that's how I always play this game, and using the keyboard to play these types of games is sometimes a little bit easier. Perhaps the one thing which would have enhanced this game are ramps and steps and elevators, and I took the opportunity to ask Mark about those, and he said the first thing he did on a PC was to create ramps and steps and elevators, and he thought that originally beyond the Amiga's capabilities. But no, that was entirely possible. We certainly had ramps in games like Hunter, where we could climb entire mountains in 3D. So it was possible, and they created games which were possible on the Amiga. Gloom is a direct, blatant rip-off of Doom, of course, and according to the author, he created this as a more arcadey version, so that the player didn't have slowdowns like reloading guns and things like that, slow shotguns and things which would have really slowed things down. He wanted a real action blaster where the player can just wade straight in and blast everything to Kingdom Come, which is a great idea. Yes, nothing slows this game down, and the enemies force the player to slow down, to stop at every given opportunity. I also asked the author about the overkill situation in the game, which has an overkill emulator in there, as we've seen, and that's essential to complete that, otherwise you can't get through the level. And according to Mark Sibly, the entire game was meant to be like that, played on the overkill simulator in a kind of 3D arcade mode, but he dreaded to think what the actual screen size would have been if the game had have turned out the size of a matchbox played on screen. And I can wholeheartedly agree the full screen mode experience is the best way to go, and in this game full screen really works to its benefit. Apart from this level's cool, crazy Gothic theme, I think the multi-levels and multi-themes of this game make it stand out and make it worth playing and being dedicated to, and to get just that bit further every time. There are no incredibly large mazes or puzzles which will baffle the player for hours. It's just takedown fighting fun. There are a number of upgrades, and you can see I've just picked up the bouncing bullets, which means that the bullets will now ricochet off everything, and just like a 3D version of Turrican games, we can wade in and start killing. Under these conditions, the player certainly gains quick respect for this great title and this great quick 3D game, which appeared on our Amigas very late into its cycle. This appeared in 1995, that's the year after Commodore folded, and Mark Sibly apparently knew that from the off, and yet he still wanted to create this title. But that was not the end of the story, very far from it, because in 1997 some fans of the show decided to create their own version of Gloom, a follow-up named the Special Edition, or perhaps the Zombie Edition as it's perhaps known to some people, and the Special Edition also created itself another animated storyline, although apparently I'm not quite sure why the screen moves left and right like this. I think that was actually in the actual game itself, but don't forget I'm playing this on the emulator. So let's just dive into that game and let's check out Gloom 97. It begins with an identical title page and an identical range of options, and again we can either play it as one or a two-player game, and we can even play it two-player combat if we want to play it together, and we can also link them just together as well, which is also amazing. And so all these options are available of course in Gloom Deluxe. And if we take a look at those credits, you can see the utilities was created by David Newton, and David Newton probably created the engine for Chris Murphy to then adapt with additional graphics and sound effects by James Cahill and Chris Burns. Turning back to the main menu, we can just about see that this is running on a low resolution screen mode, and perhaps one of the lowest attributes of this game is that it does actually run on basic stock Amigas, although you'll need something more than an Amiga 500. And let's check out the two-player mode for this. Yes, you can play two players on the screen at the same time, and that reminds me of a public domain game where you play as two wizards at the same time, known as Trick or Treat. Anybody who remembers the public domain game Trick or Treat will be able to have a full two-player match in this game. But let's just play the one-player mode, and you can see this special edition also defaults to the 1x1 pixel mode, which is great, but it doesn't default to the full screen window, which is certainly what we need. We are playing this yet again on the 040, and now in low screen resolution we can see those guys are slightly more pixelated, and it's a shame that the walls weren't updated for high resolution. in later patches and things like that, but we did get a number of patches available on the Aminet for the original Gloom and Gloom Deluxe. And the thing about this game is they are zombie versions of the same guys that we blew up in Gloom 1. You can see it's exactly the same level, only the gimmick is that they are zombies, and we gain a new introduction and a new gun type as well, which looks more like a huge barreled shotgun, and we fire the same missiles and things like that. So you can see Gloom Special Edition in 1997, created yet again by Black Magic, took the formula on just a little bit further and created just another bit more bang for that buck. Continuing from our save, we can still load up those Gothic tombs if we make it that far, only in this tweaked version we will find mad lab scientists attacking us, and those really do create a racket. Here is probably where my memory starts of the Help Me ghosts. Already we can see that Gloom has had quite an adventure from the original Gloom way back in 1995. In 96 we find the deluxe version, which added extra screen modes and the ability to play that in a window in high res mode, and then in 1997 we find a whole new enemy set as those enemies attackers, and you'll find differences in the levels, very small differences in the colour schemes perhaps as well. But as for this being the final and most complete version of the original Gloom, I'm not quite so sure, because there are patches and things like that which make this even better, and some patches include bodies which stay permanently on the floor, and extra blood I think, and things like that. There are certainly level editors available on the public domain, so guys can download extra levels for these games, and that expands them even further. But just to finish off the story even further, in 1998 we find Gloom 3, which I think this was another Gareth and Chris Murphy production. In here we find the usual setup options. This time we can use the window or in the screen, or even using the eyeglasses, which were 3D options pioneered on the Amiga, and they fizzled out to nothing many years before the Oculus Rift, of course. Let's choose the 040 on our AGA chipset, and let's begin the game.
Welcome to Gloom 3 Zombie Edition by Gareth Murphy. Additional sound effects and graphics by Chris Burns, Richard Murphy and James Cagle. Story by Chris Murphy. Gloom utilities coded by Dave Newton. With thanks to Mark Sibly for the Gloom concept and original version. Good luck.
Gloom 3 this time opens with a voiced introduction, and that's by Chris Murphy, of course. Gloom 3 is an enhanced version of the original Gloom level editor, and that has been edited to have even more brand new levels in there. And so let's just select this time the science labs, and this replaces the old levels that we found on the old Gloom. And this time the science labs are crazy affairs with scientists chained up to the walls. Let's just enhance that and create that full screen, and I'm not quite sure whether I've managed to complete this game, although I've obviously managed to get some way to get this far. can see all new textures on the floor, and that reminds me of the battle chess table. And it's great to see textures on these Amiga games. Many Amiga games were shy of offering mapped textures because they thought that would slow it down, but of course it all depends on the hardware. The great atmosphere that Gloom is perhaps famous for really piles up in Gloom 3, and you can hear the same sound effects are reused, this time in a new setting, and this time the guys on offer sometimes are quite upsetting to small viewers. And don't forget, this was back in the day before the modern first-person shooters really piled on the blood, and so there were a few criticisms of the blood levels in these types of games. And by this point, of course, I don't really think they cared too much about that, and just piled the blood up as much as possible. This is not Zombie Massacre, and this is certainly not as bad as games these days. But back in the day, some people said that this was going too far, and all these Zombie Massacre games were teaching kids bad habits. In this case, a guy on a wall decides to scream and make us jump out of our skin simply by walking past that guy on the corridor, and that's why there were no guys there, it was the guy on the wall. And so it is a dark sense of humour to play this game, and there really is a dark sense of humour sometimes when those guys pile up, and it's an easy way to die. You can see I'm on my very last life already, and we haven't really started this game yet, and this is an advanced stage of course, so the player really must be on their toes. But yet again, one criticism of the original Doom, unfortunately you will lose weaponry, and on this point I'm actually on level 1 firepower, and if I'd have played the game from scratch normally, hopefully I'd be higher than this. So let's just continue and let's see how far we can get with it. I find it amazing that the coders have even created some loading music while you're waiting for this game to load, even though this game really does require a CD, because Gloom 3 required a CD to run that thing, because it was so large apparently it would not fit on a range of discs. But those were back in those days, and these days of course space is no longer a minimum requirement on most PCs with gigabytes available, and gigabytes of RAM and storage space really would swallow this game up, absolutely no problem. But again, back in the day it was coded for those limitations, and given those limitations I think they've still done a great job. It could have been improved in one or two ways, but as far as shock atmosphere goes, it's really unbeatable. You really can't take this game for granted, and you have to give it its dues. It will kick your ass if you really treat it badly, and if you don't get all those shots on target, if you don't level up your firepower very quickly and stay there, and if you don't get from A to B as quickly as possible. For the final time, let's start a new game, and this time a new game on Gloom 3 reveals yet another environment. This time we are down in the contaminated underground storage units, and we get a new hand-drawn picture, which was yet amazing, displayed in hand mode, and most Amiga games could have done that, and even incorporated real still screens and screenshots and even photographs like we saw in Robocop 2, but most chose not to even bother, and so it's those extra touches and signs and things like that which make this game great. And I couldn't help feeling that if Eye of the Beholder or somewhere near those games was created in this kind of 3D environment, then we could have had those games on the Amiga. After departing from the Amiga, having played too much basketball and eaten too much Kentucky Fried Chicken whilst annoying the restaurateurs playing loud music upstairs like most teens do, then he eventually moved on to that PC where he created various game engines, including Monkey X, which is available for coders who want to actually skip code and get straight into gaming, creating games for the latest platforms and mobile devices. So if you want to check out Monkey X, then check out blitzbasic.com, Mark Sibly's native website, and there you'll find all the information of how to download that and how to get coding. Crazy that game development these days is not involved with coding, and coding is certainly the last thing involved. And so my last question to Mark Sibly was, would it be possible to convert Monkey X and get that running on x68K machines? And I'm thinking most Amiga emulators these days will be able to handle graphics like this plus more, and many Amiga users are actually emulated users these days. So would it be possible? Well, I didn't get a reply on that, but we are still waiting for a full environment 3D modelled construction kit on the Amiga, and I'm dying to create my favourite rally game and convert games such as Ridge Racer to the Amiga, but I haven't got a 3D construction kit which is fast enough. Certainly hats off to Mark for creating Guardian and Gloom and making full use of the 3D on the Amiga when most people said it could not be done. Well, it certainly could be done, and it could have been done even better if those students weren't monkeying around having a great time doing it. But they did put in amazing long coding hours, and his girlfriend wasn't apparently appeased by that. On the Amiga, you can see a massive firefight results from lots of guys trying to attack me all at the same time, which leads me on to the scores. Data magazine gave this 2 out of 5, which is 40%. The next lowest score was actually on the Lemon Amiga website. They currently gave Gloom 1 75%, which is quite shameful. Amiga Computing, issue 91 in October 1995, gave this 81%. The One gave it 90%. CO Amiga gave this 90%, and a Superstar in September 1995. Amiga Power likewise gave this 90% in August 95, and Amiga Format gave Gloom 1 91% and a Gold Award in September 1995. With the Dato and the Lemon Amiga rating this down, that brings it down to 8 out of 10. And I don't think that is a bad average score at all. It's still very good, bordering on brilliant, and I'd say this is very good, bordering on brilliant to this day. And the Gloom franchise certainly kept me hooked, and I hope it will you as well. Thank you very much for viewing another Lemon Amiga Play Guide and Review. Thank you.